Good morning and welcome to our kitchen and welcome to Talkie Girls Grammar School. I hope everybody's well. It's great to have you on board with us today. If you're joining us from Talkie Girls Grammar School, you know the drill. The questions and queries down the side there on the comments, and I will answer them as we're going along throughout the lesson. If you're watching this from around the world on YouTube, then if you just want to put your comments along the bottom there, and we'll be able to get back to you on that. Girls who are watching this from Talkie Girls Grammar, you've obviously had the recipe already. That's on through your teams, but I also have the ingredients and equipment along the bottom if you're watching this back on YouTube and joining us around the world at Talkie Girls Grammar School, which is great to have you all on board. Wonderful to see you all this morning. Virtually, back from our kitchen. We've got a fun recipe this morning. We're doing something called a scone bread twist, where we're going to be braiding bread. We're going to be talking about bread. We're looking at aeration this morning as well. Okay, so that's what the one is today. Let me just get the recipe up for you so you all know what we're doing. We're going to also look a little bit about food provenance, which is going to lead into your next lesson, girls, if you're for the next lesson that we've got. So. If you just want to be ready for that's what we're going to be looking at next lesson, so I'll get you some information on that, so you know what's going on, and that's what we're going to be leading into. Okay, so let's show you the recipe before I talk about any much longer. Let's show you what we're doing. So as I say, it's a scone bread twist. So here's the recipe for you. We're going to be looking at scone bread twist in the context of food provenance. Now I'll tell you what food provenance is in a moment, and we'll explain a little bit more about that. Let's go through that one and say what's that involved. What is this food provenance business? How does that work? What is it all about? First, we're also going to be talking about demonstrating your skills in shaping a dough, chopping, grating, using the oven. We'll understand something called chemical raising agents, or raising agents and aeration. Now, before we get started, we need to get ready for a practical. So you need to get yourself ready, get your area ready, and collect your equipment. So to do that one, we do something called mise en place. Mise en place is that getting ready, and we use the words HATI to remember what we need to do. For those of you watching us back on YouTube, we're using the Hodder Education package, dynamic package for, and that's exploring food for Key Stage 3. And now, HATI, H stands for hair, tie your hair back or wear a hat, wash those hands of yours. Don't forget A for apron, putting an apron on to keep yourself protecting the food, protect from you. T, make sure your tabletop or wherever you're working is nicely cleaned, anti-back down, very important at these times. Next T is a great piece of equipment for a tray, and that tray will be good for the next two, which is I for ingredients and E for your equipment. Okay, so let's come back to me and we will get going. We'll do that one together. Right. So we're gonna do this one together. So we're going to work with this one together, and we'll go round and do step by step. I say it's great to have you all on board. Hopefully you can all hear me. If you just want to leave a little smiley face or a thumbs up down the side, girls, just so I know you can all hear me, that'd be fabulous. Let's do this together. So let's go round my kitchen and to your kitchen, and we will go round and get ourselves ready for the next bit. Okay, here we go. The first thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we have washed our hands and we are ready to cook. As normal, you need to make sure you've got your hand wash close to hand, nice soapy soap. And we're going to be doing it the normal way. So we do the palms of our hands backwards and forwards. Then we do our fingers and with fingers the other side. We do between our fingers and the back of the hands there. Don't forget the thumbs and the wrist there. Bit of a workout this morning. I say we don't need Joe Wicks here. We've got our own working out, our washing working out. So once you've got your soap on, we need some hot soapy water. So make sure you've got yourself some hot soapy water on there. Here's my hot soapy water, and we're going to do that one again. So palms of your hands, fingers, back of your hands, between those fingers, thumbs. Make sure they're properly cleaned there, those thumbs, and round the wrists. Okay, so we are properly clean. Okay, you know how this works, 20 seconds, and that's how we get doing. And then we just need to dry those off. Let's dry those off. Put a paper towel there. Make sure it's all clean and dry and ready to go. Put that in the bin. Okay, so then we need to get our aprons on and make sure we are prepared to cook. So there's my apron and my chef whites. So let's get our chef whites on and we will get ready to cook. So hopefully you've all got your aprons on there. Fabulous, fabulous. Yep, you can all just, the new down there. Let's have a look. Thumbs up, you can all hear. Fabulous. Everyone's all right this morning. Smiley faces. That's what we like. Good, good. Everyone's okay this morning. I'm glad to hear that. So I'm just going to get my school whites on. There we go. Okay. It's well, it's a bit weird doing lessons from my kitchen. I was actually in school yesterday, which was great to actually be back in school, and you'll be glad to know, girls at Talkie Girls Grammar, the school is still standing. Everyone's all right. I saw Dr. Smith yesterday, and he's all very well as well, our headmaster at Talkie Girls Grammar School. So be glad to know it's all looking lovely, cleaned up, and ready for when we all return at some point. But in the meantime, there we are, ready to go. I've got aprons on, sleeves rolled up, and I am ready to go, and hopefully you are too. So let's go back to the workstation there, and let's be to cook. Okay, and let's see what we're going to be cooking today. Let's go through the recipe that we've got for you today. So I'm going to go quickly back to the slides, and we're going to go through what the recipe is that we're doing today. Okay, everybody. So let's do that. And the recipe is about to be on your screen in a moment. So equipment today, we've got baking tray, parchment paper, which would be fabulous. We need to make sure we've got those. Sharp knife, sharp knife and a butter knife. So what I mean by a butter knife is, I mean just a knife that you've got a rounded end to it. So that's what I mean by a butter knife there. So just like a normal one you butter your bread with, and chopping board and a mixing bowl. Okay, so scone bread twist. What do we need for a scone bread twist? We need 200 grams of plain flour. Ideally, you're using a strong plain flour or a bread flour, but any kind of plain flour would be okay with this one. It would still work. You need 40 grams or 2 tablespoons of unsalted butter. And again, we're in lockdown larder situations, so any kind of butter will work well with this one if you've got that available. We're going to sieve those two together, and we're going to add in 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Now, we'll talk about why we add that and what's in there, and how that's going to work for what we call something called aeration when it comes to raising agents. Caster sugar would be fab, but if you don't need to, there's plenty of sweetness in this without the sugar. So while we're trying to reduce our sugar intake, we can do 1 tablespoon, but we don't need to for that one. We can leave that one out. We're going to cut it in. We're going to rub it in. We're going to add one egg. And some milk. Now, if you're vegan, you don't need to add an egg. You could add some water and perhaps some xanthan gum or something along those sort of lines if you were looking for something instead of an egg. Some milk. You can do a milk alternative. You can run. It doesn't need to be a dairy milk. It could be an oat milk if you wanted to do that, or an almond milk, and that would work just fine. We're going to roll that one out, and I'm going to talk you through about how that's going to work when we go to shaping our dough and putting that together. Now, you can use pesto, which this is for. You can make your own pesto if you wanted to, and I will tell you a little bit about that one, using kale or nettles instead of basil if you haven't got basil, and some lemon juice and how that works, and some garlic. So you can do that one your own way, and then we're going to braid that one off. Okay, let's go back to me and let's get ourselves started and talk about what all of this is. How does it work? Okay, so let's get back to me, and I'm going to talk you through that. Hello there again. So we've got everybody there. Fabulous. We can see you all. We're going to get going making our basic mix there. So what do we need in our basic mix? Well, like we said on the recipe there, we're going to start with flour. So I've got my bowl of flour there, mixing bowl there. We're going to put into the flour, we're going to add into that our other ingredients. Okay, so let's go with this one. We have got flour. So I'm going to be using just a plain flour. So like I say, lockdown larder situations at the moment, so you might not be able to get hold of a strong bread flour. If you've got strong bread flour or a strong flour, that would work really, really well, but we can do it without, and we can use a standard flour there as well. So please don't worry about that. We're going for 200 grams on there. Now, again, you might not be able to have scales at home. So if you haven't got scales at home, we're looking at 2 large handfuls into a bowl here will work just as well. OK, but if you've got a scales, we are looking at 200 grams of flour into there. Now, the 200 grams of flour, we want to try and do sifting. If you can use this one, I'm going to talk about this one called aeration today. Now, aeration is very simply adding air into food. And there's lots of different ways that you can add air into food. Think about an egg. If anyone's made meringues at home before or anything like that, and you want to add air to it, to the egg white, you'll whisk it really, really hard. OK, you can beat it really, really hard. If you make a cake at home, you can get the butter and the sugar and you mix it really hard and you cream it together. So you can add air in by your own hands, by mechanical means. OK, we are going to add air in by mechanical means again. So we're actually going to sieve the 200 grams into our bowl. We're going to sieve the flour in. And when we sieve it, we're not only going to break down the flour so it's much, much finer when it comes through, so we've got lumps or anything, but we're also going to be adding air to it. And that's a form of what we call aeration. Let me write this on the board so we got that one. Aeration. It's a good word. It's a GCSE word. So you're year 7s, it's the year 7 Talking Girls grammar lesson, but let's do some GCSE while we're on it. So let's talk about aeration. Okay, aeration. Okay, that's what we are going to be looking at. In particular, we're going to look at a particular type. But let's first of all look at aeration, and let's look at mechanical. That's when we add air in with what we do. So we're going to be doing some mechanical aeration. So let's mechanically aerate. Let's add our 200 grams of aerated flour. So here's the flour going into here. And I'm just going to go in with 200 grams of flour. Here we go. So I'm just going to sieve that one in. Let me move it so you can see what I'm doing. There we go. I'm just going to sieve that one in. And can you see what I'm doing there? So while I'm doing this, I'm actually going to be adding air. I'm capturing air into this as well as sieving this down. And we're looking at 200 grams. So if you can do this one. Now, if you haven't got a sieve at home, that's fine. And the alternative there would be you measure out your 200 grams of flour and you can whisk your flour. Now that sounds an odd way of doing it, but it works in exactly the same way. It will break the flour into teeny tiny particles, and as well as breaking it down into teeny tiny bits, so it's nice and fine, you will get air into your mixture there. So if you haven't got a sieve, use a whisk. If you haven't got a whisk, what could I do then? Well, if you haven't got a whisk, get 2 forks and make a whisk. And you're thinking, what is this man talking about? There we go, put that to the side. Let me show you. So if you didn't have it, what you could do is you could make one. So let's say I didn't have a sieve. Didn't have a sieve at hand. What could I do to mechanically aerate my mixture? So I could use a whisk, and I could just literally get and I could whisk that up, which seems odd, but it would work in the same way. It would aerate mechanically our food. Okay, and so that would work. So I could use a whisk, or I could make my own whisk with 2 forks. So if you get your 2 forks, okay, just like that, and marry them, like they're kissing. There we go. And now I've got my own little whisk. Okay, so I've got 2 forks together, and I can create my own whisk. And again, that would work the same. So there's lots of different options here during lockdown larder situation when you might not be able to get out as much and you might not have everything in the home, things that you can use alternatively. Okay. Also, I've said before about getting hold of ingredients. Just a quick reminder, if you can't get hold of flour still, I know it's quite difficult in some shops to get hold of it during this peculiar time. So if that's the case, what could you do? 2 tips for you there. First tip is this, go to a local commercial supplier. So it's a commercial supplier that would be supplying schools, restaurants, cafes, that sort of thing. And a lot of those are now doing home deliveries. So we are actually using the same company that we use at Talkie Girls Grammar School for our ingredients delivery. That's a company called Bid Food. If you're watching this back on YouTube, then you can get that right across the country. They deliver right across the country. That's Bid Food. So, and there's lots of other corporate companies that do the same. So commercial companies that deliver to restaurants and cafes that will now deliver to homes. Second option, go and find a local pub or restaurant that might be closed at the moment and email them or phone them and see whether you can't just get ingredients off them, because they'll have ingredients that they're not using at the moment. So there's two options there. All right, 200 grams of aerated, mechanically aerated, either by using the sieve and adding air in that way, or you may have not used a sieve and you may have used a whisk, or you may not have used that and you may have used 2 forks. So let's get all these ones together. 200 grams. Now the next 200 grams, we're going to add 40 grams of baking fats or butter, unsalted butter, depending on what you've got available there. So we're going to add that one into our mix. Okay, now when we do this one, we are going to be, let me just put that one in there. We're going to be adding this in a certain way. Now before we add the butter into our mix, we're going to go add a couple more dry ingredients. Okay, so we need 40 grams out, but before we add that, I'm going to add a couple more dry ingredients. Now those couple of dry ingredients are going to be an amazing stuff. This is it. This is called baking powder. What is baking powder, you might be thinking? What is this weird concoction, baking powder? Now, baking powder is chemistry. Okay, it's really exciting chemistry, and because it's got two main chemicals in there, it's got an acid and it's got an alkali. It's got a food acid and a food alkali. Now you may have done this in science already, but an acid and an alkali are 2 different types of chemical on an extreme of what we call a pH value. Okay, you've got the pH values like and you've got one extreme, which is acid. Okay, and you've got another extreme, which is alkaline. They're measured in their pHs, and one's higher and one's lower. Now they react together and form a chemical reaction. When you put an acid and alkali together, something happens, and that's what we want to happen inside our food. Some weird chemistry. Let me explain what that chemistry is. Now this is a type of aeration, but this is a type of aeration we call chemical aeration, because this is chemically going to add air to our food. What does he mean? What does he mean? Let me explain. 2 things. So the chemical one is an acid and an alkali. What happens? Does anyone know? So we just put that one out on there. We got quite a few of you watching. So does anyone know? Do you want to put comments down the side there, girls? What does happen when you mix an acid and alkali together? Do you want? I'm just going to give you a moment to think about that. Does anyone know already what happens when you mix an acid and alkali together? Something at one end of the pH scale and something at the other end of the pH scale. Before I tell you, let me see if anyone can have a quick guess. We've got a few of you there. Anyone have a guess? Anyone have any thoughts? Going to give you a minute. Oh, now this is an interesting one. I'll just tell you in a minute those ones. I've got some more other comments, but let's have a look. Does anyone know what happens when you put an acid and alkali together? Just waiting, a couple of people are typing there. And then I'll tell you in a minute. But I just wondered if anyone knew already. Oh, we got some answers coming in. Right. So anyone else? Let's have a look. Does it become neutral? Yes, it does become neutral, and something happens when it starts to become neutral. Yep, goes neutral, neutralizes, neutralizes. Yes, it becomes neutral. Yes, it does become neutral. And when it becomes neutral, something is released. So we've got an acid and alkali, and it becomes neutral. And in that becoming neutral, something is produced. And that something that is produced is a gas called CO2. So it becomes neutral, but as it becomes neutral, we have gas called CO2, carbon dioxide, is produced. And we also have some salts in there that are produced, but we have CO2 produced. And CO2, a gas, is going to add more air to our mixture. So we've got mechanically adding air in, and we sieved it, or we whisked it, and we're going to chemically add air in. and that is by putting a dry acid and a dry alkali in here, and that's what baking powder is. It's a combination of dry acid and dry alkali. Now the dry acid and the dry alkali, let me tell you which ones they are in case you wanted to know. The acid is something we call cream of tartar. You may have heard these words before, cream of tartar. And the alkali we're going to use that's in there is something called bicarbonate of soda. Bicarbonate of soda. Now, the bicarbonate of soda and the acid and alkali will react together when we add liquid because they're dry at the moment. Nothing's going to happen at the moment. They're dry, but as soon as we add a liquid to them, they will start to react together. They will come together. The acid and alkali will come together to try and neutralise, and as they start to neutralise, they are going to release CO2, and that's what's going to help our scone bread twists to rise. Okay, let me show you. Shall we show you? You've probably done this one at school already, but here it is. Let's add some liquid to it and show you what happens. Here we go. I'm just going to grab a cup. So I've got a cup here. I'm going to put in some baking powder. Okay, baking powder's in there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make them wet. Now, here we go. I'm going to make the dry acid, activate the dry acid and dry alkali. And what will start to happen is, a bit more in there. I might just give it a little stir. Where's my spoon for? You might just be able to see. That is bubbling away there and sizzling away. We've got this bubbling and bubbling and bubbling, and that is what's going to happen inside our bread. Okay, and that's bubbling away and creating CO2. I've got CO2 being produced. It's the same stuff you find inside CO2 fire extinguishers. Okay, so that is being produced right this very second. Really exciting, really exciting. Bit of food science there. Love a bit of food science. Okay, so what we're going to do is going to put that baking powder in. Now we're going to be putting in there, let's get my spoon again, get a spoon here. We're going to be putting in 2 teaspoons of baking powder. 1, 2. Okay, in they go. They're going to be going in there, and they're working away in there. Oops, let me just grab those ones as well. So you've got both of those things happening. They're both working away. We've got them both happening there for us. And now we've, as well as the baking powder, so you can put a little bit of sugar in there as well if you want to. Now let's ask us a few more questions as we're going down here. And let's go back. Just going to quickly flick back to the recipe here for you. Okay. So, so somebody said, what are we preheating the oven to? So the oven is preheated to 200 degrees centigrade, which is gas mark 6. So if you've done that one, that's what you need to have it done to. So 200 degrees, gas mark 6 to do that one. So hopefully you've got that one. Now we have some more interesting comments come back as well. So let me just show you some more interesting things that have been said. Let me get back. Okay. All right. So we had some more really interesting comments coming down the side here. Now we had one from one of the girls who's saying, just we thought you might like to be interested to know, I'm using aquafaba, which is water from chickpea cans instead of an egg. Absolutely, that would work really, really well. And in fact, you can make meringues out of that chickpea water as well. It's an amazing stuff, and it can have the same consistency of an egg if you're a vegan. So that's an option, and it works really, really well. So so well done to you for having a go with that one as well as an alternative. So I'm very impressed there with what we're doing. Now, in there, I've got the key ingredients to make our scone bread twist. So what we're now going to do is we're now going to mix all of that together and have a go with this one. So the internet connection this morning is a little bit tricky, but we're going to stick with this one. So now we've got those in there. We sift all that together. I'm going to be putting in our butter. And I'm going to be going with 40 grams of the butter there. So let's get the knife there. 40 grams of butter into this one. Okay. Now, if you haven't got scales at home and you're thinking, how do I do that one? If you actually look on the side of the fat, you should just be able to see that along the top, there's some measurements there. So you can actually use that if you wanted to roughly work out what you're doing. I'm just going to work this one out here. So here we go. So that should be around about 40 grams. Let me just have a look. Oh, look how good am I. 40 grams spot on there. So 40 grams of butter, in it goes. Now, if you can remember rightly, we said to you, if we add the liquid, as you showed you earlier with my fizzing cup, if you add the liquid to the baking powder, it will start to fizz up, and that chemical reaction of acid and alkali, cream of tartar and bicarbonate of soda to create CO2 is going to happen. Do you remember that one? So we've got cream of tartar, acid, alkali, bicarbonate of soda creating CO2. Now, if we add liquid into that, that's going to happen straight away. What happens then with butter if it gets hot? Now, the answer to that one is if the butter gets hot, it's going to melt. It's going to go from something that is a solid lump of butter into something that becomes a liquid. Then we've got it activating the baking powder, and we don't want that happening until it gets to the oven. So we are going to be using the butter, and we're not going to get our fingers in straight away because we don't want it to melt. We don't want it to form a liquid. We don't want it to activate our baking powder. Okay, so what we're going to use is we're going to use a knife to cut that butter up teeny tiny small. Okay, so with my bowl, I'm going to hold my bowl like this, and then I've got maximum control. It's in a headlock. I'm going to use a rounded butter knife, just a sort of not a particularly sharp one. It's just a normal butter knife I'd use to put butter on. I'm going to chop the butter up teeny tiny small. Okay, so I'm just going to chop this butter up really teeny tiny small. Okay, so and that's what I want you to do is now to chop that butter up, what we call cutting in. Okay, it's a technical term called cutting in, which does exactly what it says on the tin. It is just about cutting it teeny tiny small. So I'm just cutting up this butter teeny tiny small. Here we go. There we go, girls. If you can do that as well, that would be great. So we got chopping up teeny tiny small. Okay, there we go. Nice and small, chopped up. And I'm going to continue to chop that up. Now, how small does it need to be? Well, it needs to be about the size, or as small as you can go, but I would say if you can get it about the size of a rabbit poo, it's good. Okay, not that we eat rabbit poos, don't go around eating rabbit poos, but that's the kind of size. Size of a raisin or a sultana would be absolutely fabulous. Okay, so I'm just going to chop that up. A little tip here, if you're wondering, have I chopped up all of my pieces small enough? What you can do, give your bowl a little tap on the work surface there, not too hard if you're using a glass or ceramic bowl, but give it a little tap on there, and then your larger bits will come to the top. Okay, and then we're just going to chop that up teeny tiny small, even smaller. So I'm just chopping that one up teeny tiny small against the side of the bowl there. Okay, can you see that one there? I'm just doing that one teeny tiny small. Okay, so that's happening right now. Okay, I think I'm done. I think they're the right sort of the amount. Now, only when you're teeny tiny, as small as you can do with a knife, can we then get our fingers in here. Now, we're going to be using our fingers now to make it even smaller still, but we don't want to melt the butter. We don't want liquid to be coming into this until the very last minute, because when you get liquid in there, acid, alkali together, creating CO2. So we need to leave that one to the very last minute. So what we are going to do is we're going to use our fingers, but we're going to have to use this quickly so as not to melt the butter. And we're also going to need to use the very ends of our fingertips. Okay, so the very ends, the tickly bits of our fingers, the pinchy parts, we're going to be using those. And what I want you to do is get your fingers in very quickly, and you're going to rub it in very quickly and then drop it. Rub it and drop it. So lift and tickling those tiny little bits of butter. Okay, so we can get them even smaller still. So that's what I'd like you to do now. I'm going to get our fingers in, but only the very tips of our fingers. I'm going to be very, very quick, and we're going to lift and tickle these ones so we can get them very, very small. Okay, so I'm just doing this one now. I'm going to make the camera small, lower down so you can all see. And we're just going to lift and tickle, lift and tickle, lift and tickle. So I'm just lifting and tickling this one, making it a little bit. I'll move all my stuff out so you can see. Just going to lift and tickle, lift and tickle, lift and tickle. And I'm going to use both hands now. I'm just going to lift it up higher and going to get these bits of butter to get even teeny tiny small, and surrounded by all of the mixture there. Can you see what I'm doing there? So we're just going to lift and tickle it and breaking down those bits of flour even smaller. Now again, if you're not sure whether it's small enough already, what you can do, little tip here, is just you need to give those the bowl a little tap on the work surface, and you'll find that the big bits become small bits. And we can get those covered around. You see what we're doing there? Now we're just getting all of those rubbed in. Now again, this is a process called rubbing in, and it does exactly what it says. You are just literally going to use these ones, using the fingertip. Now you can get a little bit higher, so I'm just going to get a little bit higher now. Here we go, can you see that? So we're lifting these up really high. Now, while I'm lifting them up higher, can you see what I'm doing to the food? Do you know anyone want to know what we're doing to the food? We're doing one of those other ones again. We are getting air in, another form of aeration. Okay, so we have got a chemical aeration going on there. We have mechanical, and we've got more mechanical aeration. So while I'm lifting those up, I'm trapping air into my mixture, making a light and fluffy mixture. So by doing so, I'm doing what we call mechanical aeration. Okay, so more mechanical aeration, getting yet more air into my mixture. And we like aeration. It's a good word. I like aeration, and I'm going to be just getting some more. Again, unsure, you bowl a little tap, and then we can just crumble it down. Now you want to see that butter just going to completely disappear. It's going to completely disappear in your bowl. You're not going to be able to see it at all. And it's a little bit like when we start to make a crumble at this point. Okay, but obviously you've got baking powder in there as well as your flour and your butter in there. Now, tip: if the butter starts to stick to your fingers, stop. That means the butter's melting and forming a liquid. We don't want to do it. It's something we call plasticity when we're talking about GCSE level. It's turning from a solid to a liquid. We don't want it to turn to a liquid. So if it starts to stick to your finger, stop. If the mixture starts to turn yellow, stop. Because again, what's starting to happen there is that solid is starting to turn to a liquid, and we don't want it to turn to a liquid until the very last minute. Okay, so we're ready to go on this one because we're going to have to be quite fast getting that one together. So I've now got it's been mechanically aerated twice. The first mechanical aeration, I used a sieve, or I could have used a whisk. And then I lift from a height. I was letting it drop in and capture air. The second type of mechanical aeration, I was lifting and tickling it up. I was rubbing it in, and there we've got stuff ready for a chemical reaction to go on there. Chemical aeration, that's ready in there. That's in there, ready to go. So we are nearly there. Okay, now we need to make sure we've got the next bits and pieces all ready to go, because we're going to need to be quite fast in how we do this one. So we're going to need to make sure you're prepped for everything else. So I'm just going to leave this for a minute. No chemical aeration going on just yet. It's still dry in there. No liquids being added. But think about other things where you might have tried this chemical aeration when you did at school. Anyone made volcanoes and you put vinegar, which is an acid, food acid, and you put it with some bicarbonate soda or baking powder into volcanoes, and they bubbled up over the top. That is chemical aeration, in food chemical aeration. Okay, that's going to happen when we add liquid to this. Okay, so let's make sure we got everything else ready. We are going to be in a moment adding, if you want to add an egg, the aquafabia, you can add that, which is fabulous. We're going to be adding a little bit of milk if you want to, so you can use milk alternative if you're a dairy alternative to milk, so an oat or an almond would work perfectly well. And we're going to combine those ingredients together. Once we combine those ingredients together, we are going to be rolling this out, and we're going to be plaiting and twisting our bread. Okay, so you're going to need a few things ready. Obviously, your oven is going to need to be preheated, so make sure you preheat your oven, so that's ready. You're going to need to make sure you've got a baking tray lined, so some kind of baking tray, got baking tray there, and we're going to line it with some paper there, some greaseproof or baking paper, ready to go in a moment. So I'm just going to Put that one down there. Baking paper, baking parchment, greaseproof paper onto my tray. Okay, tray lined and ready to go. I'm going to need something to roll this out with. So ideally, you want to be using a rolling pin. But let's look at some alternatives that in case you didn't have a rolling pin at hand. What other things could you be using? So you could use a bottle. So if you've got a glass bottle, that would work fine. That would work fine. And again, alternatives at home, a milk bottle works just as well if you've got a glass milk bottle. Now, whether you're using a glass bottle or a glass milk bottle, just be careful. They are glass, so don't not too much pressure, but you'll get enough pressure to be able to flatten things out. So have you got your rolling pin at the ready? I hope you have. We're going to need to make sure that we have dusted our work surface. You might have a flour dredger. If you haven't got a flour dredger, just a little bit of flour on the work surface and on our rolling pin so it's not going to stick. Okay, so we're just getting all of those bits prepped and ready in advance. I've now got flour on my rolling pin. I've got flour on my work surface. Put a bit more on there so it doesn't stick. I've got my tray lined with greaseproof paper. Now, if you haven't got greaseproof paper, I know it's another one that's a peculiar one to get hold of in the shops. So you could just put a bit of flour on the line the tray with flour. It's you've got to be careful with that one because obviously when you put it in the oven, the flour will cook and it may you might get more of a burny taste to it. But if you haven't got greaseproof paper, that's an alternative. Okay, so just line the tray with a bit of flour beforehand. We're going to try and help you out with lockdown larder situations. Okay, any more questions? What if you don't have baking powder? Aha! Now, if you don't have baking powder, you can mix some other kitchen food ingredients if you've got those ones. So you can mix your own baking powder. So if you've got cream of tartar at home, which comes in little packets or it can come in tubs as well. And if you've got bicarbonate of soda, which also comes in little tubs, a similar sort of thing, you can mix your own. A teaspoon of each will work well, and that will work. What if you haven't got cream of tartar, you haven't got bicarbonate of soda, you haven't got baking powder? What could we do? This is another type of aeration. Now, this is a type of aeration we call biological. It will take longer, but we can add biology to this. We've added chemistry, we've got physics, mechanical, chemistry, chemical, biology, biological aeration. We're covering all the sciences today. Biological aeration. Now this is going to take yourself a little bit longer with this one, but if you haven't got any acid or alkali, if you haven't got yourself some cream of tartar or bicarbonate soda or some baking powder, which is a combination of the two, you could add yeast. Yeah, yeast, and it turns it into a much longer proving bread. Okay, yeast are little microorganisms and they can breathe CO2 into your scone bread. Okay, and then it becomes more of a bread and less of a scone bread, but it will work. You can use yeast. So one option there is to add yeast. Now, let's have a look at the top comments. So an option there would be if you haven't got baking powder, and you haven't got cream of tartar, you haven't got bicarbonate soda to make your own baking powder, you could use yeast. Yeast were little microorganisms and they will breathe CO2 into your food. They will produce CO2. Given that you add liquid and there is sugar in there and it's the correct temperature, which is a nice warm temperature. So if you're using yeast, then you'll need to put warm milk into this or warm water into this to activate it, and you do need to use your sugar. Okay, so it's got something to eat, something to drink, and it's got something to the right conditions is what we say, the right conditions for yeast to be able to blow bubbles or create bubbles of CO2 into your food. That is biological, that is yeast. Now, if you haven't got chemical raising agents and you haven't got biological yeast, these are all called raising agents because they're all going to produce air inside our food that's going to make our food rise. Okay, so these are all raising agents, whether they're mechanical, chemical, biological, they all make our food rise. If you haven't got yeast, lockdown and larder situation, you can create yeast. Okay, what does he mean, create yeast? Well, microorganisms of yeast are all around us. They're on everything. Okay, there's hundreds of types. They're on fruit. You'll find yeast on fruit. You'll find yeast on all sorts of fruit. If you've got grapes at home, you know that white mottly effect on the outside? It's yeast. It's everywhere. So you can create your own yeast. Now, how do you create your own yeast to go into bread? Well, very simply, equal quantities of flour and water, and it's going to take longer. It's going to take about 4 or 5 days, but it's possible. Equal quantities of flour and water. Put about 300 grams of flour, 300 millilitres of water into a bowl. Just a glass bowl or a kiln jar, a large glass jar. Put them in there. Leave it. Leave it in the garden. You can leave it in the airing cupboard. You can leave it on the kitchen side, but covered, lightly covered, not sealed, and leave it. Now, after a day, what's going to happen is you're going to find that your mixture of flour and water will start to bubble. What do you do then? Take away a third of the mixture, throw it away, and add 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water to it. Stir it all in, mix it up, leave it. After another day, it will start to be bubbling up again. Take away a third, add 100 grams of flour, add 100 grams of water or 100 milliliters of water to that, stir it up, leave it for another day. It will start to bubble up again. And you keep repeating this for about 5 days until by the end of 5 days, you've got something that is so bubbly, it's like a really bitter lemonade. And that is what we call a sourdough yeast. And after about 5 days of doing that, you can use that sourdough yeast and use it in this. It's going to take longer to make, and it's going to take longer to prove. If you're using a packet, fast action packet yeast in this today, that's fine. You're going to need to leave it for, say, about half an hour to an hour to prove. You're using a sourdough yeast where you make it yourself. You're going to need to leave it overnight to prove and get air in. Okay, so it's going to take longer, but there are options for everybody here to aerate and make our food rise. Phew, that's a lot of chemistry and a lot of science in there. Just thought, yep. So anyone else questions there? We've got lots of questions here coming in today, which is great. I like to answer questions from the class. So this is brilliant. So you just keep those questions coming, please. Salted butter, yep, that's fine. Right. Now let's get back to it. We've talked loads about aeration, and we need to get on. So what we've got in here now, we've got flour. We have got baking powder. We have got butter. A little bit of sugar in there as well, and that is all ready and mixed up. We have got our baking tray ready. We've got our rolling pins ready. We've got our board ready. We are nearly there. Now the final thing we need to have ready is what are we going to put in the middle of this? Now I've suggested a pesto, so just a standard green pesto there. So I've just got a green pesto there, which is what I'm going to be putting into this one. If you haven't got pesto, and I know it's another one to tricky one to get hold of, you might be able to use this. This is a passata, so just a passata or chopped tomato goes really nicely into this as well. So have that one ready. The final thing we need to make sure we've got ready is we need some cheese. You need some cheese from it. Cheese is a good one. So before we get mixing our liquid in, I'm going to get the cheese ready as well. So I've got my cheese here. And it's really nice to add a little bit of cheese to this. I didn't say you need to, but it does good. It does make it really good. So what I'm going to do is get my cheese grater. Get a cheese grater. I'm going to use the side there. Be careful. There are little sharp 9p pieces down there, which are going to be cutting it in. I'm going to grate myself some cheese. How much cheese? Around about 25 to 30 grams of cheese is going to be all right, depending on how much you like your cheese. So I'm just going to do that one into there so it's ready to go. Here is my cheese going into there. You can use different types of cheese. You can use the different size of cheese graters if you want to. You can use Parmesan cheese, which is beautiful in this one. I'm just going to be using a mild cheddar here and just grate it in. Look at a teeny tiny cheese grater. How cute's that? It's my little nutmeg cheese grater. There we are. That's a teeny tiny one. Or we've got a big one. There we go. So I'm just going to putting in there some cheese into there, around about 25 to 30 grams of cheese. I'm going to do 40 grams just because I like it. But it's up to you how you want to do that one. Got my cheese ready to go as well. Okay, everything is prepped and in place. Tin's ready, rolling pin in place is ready. cheese is ready. And I'm also, like I say, I'm going to have in with my in the middle of mine, I'm using a pesto. So let me get undo my pesto. Whoa. So pesto. Now I said if you can't get hold of pesto, you can't get hold of tomato, what can you do? Can you make your own? Yes. So lockdown larder situations, what can we do replacement wise? Do you remember we did nettles before? Nettles are lovely at this time of the year, beautiful at the moment, really, really lovely. And you can use those ones. Go and pick them from when you go out for your exercise, go and grab some nettles. When you grab the nettles, get your finger and thumb at the base and twist. Okay, the stings on nettles go upwards. Okay, so if you get underneath and give them a twist, you won't get any sting on them. Put them into a pan of boiling water, what we call blanch them, and take them out, and the sting will have gone. Okay, then you can chop them up teeny tiny small, mix them with some garlic and lemon juice. If you've got some toasted pine nuts, brilliant. If you haven't, fine. Chop them up really, really small, and you can use them, and it will look just like pesto. Okay, a 3-person's pesto there. A little bit of lemon juice if you've got that one. A little bit of cheese in there as well if you've got that one. But just chopped up with some garlic would be really lovely with a little bit of oil in there, and you can create your own pesto out of nettles. You could also create it out of kale. If you've got kale or spinach, that would work fine as well. Just chop it up really, really, really small, mix it with a little bit of lemon juice, a little bit of oil, some pine nuts if you've got it, and some garlic if you've got that one. Mix it all up, whiz it up in a little, like a little tiny, one of these little whizzy things with a knife, blender things, stick blenders, whatever you've got at home. You can create your own pesto. So you don't need to. If you're doing that, you're looking at around about 60 grams of kale, 60 grams of nettle would work really, really well. And if you've got basil, wow, you might be growing basil. We've just started growing basil during lockdown. We've got a basil plant growing. It's about so high at the moment. That's how you really do it. So if you wanted to make your own at home, ideally, toast the pine nuts, take them off, toast them in a pan, crush them up, pestle and mortar, food mixer. A little bit of oil, a little bit of lemon juice, a little bit of garlic, blitz it all up, and that's what this is. That's a basil pesto. Okay. So lots of different options there for going inside it. If you haven't got, so if you want to do this one now, you haven't got that one, then you can just use a tomato filling, a passata, tomato puree. There's lots of different options available to you here to go into this one, and you can make them sweet as well. I've done this one with frozen fruit, which works quite nicely. Defrost the frozen fruit, mix a little bit of corn flour in them, a little bit of sugar, and you can have a fruit one. Okay, very versatile. There is my pesto ready to go in. I think I've got everything. So I've got my filling, my cheese, and I'm going to put some pesto in there. We're ready to go. Here we go then. Final thing. Let's go with this one now. I'm going to mix all of this together. So I've got my mix, and before I get this in the oven, I need to bind all those ingredients together. That means putting them all together into one to bind all those together. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to bind them all. Now I'm going to use an egg. The aquafiber. You can use that if you're using that today. The chickpea water. Got my egg. Okay, so I'm going to be cracking my egg in. In goes my egg. This is going to add liquids. This is where we need to be quite fast now. We're going to get going on this one quite fast. So add my egg in. In it goes. One egg in. Right. In with my egg, I'm going to add a little bit of milk. Now, I'm going to just be adding enough to bind my ingredients together. So I'm going to go back to my knife, which seems odd. Not my fingers, but my knife, and I'm going to go and combine all of those ingredients together. So I'm now stirring together the flour, the baking powder, and the egg is going to bind that all together into a ball. And I want a dough ball, okay? So I'm going to do this one quite quickly now. I'm going to want a dough ball in there. Okay, so that's starting to bind together. So it's starting to clump together into lumps. Good. Now we need some milk now. I'm going to carry on doing this. Don't get, if you're using yeast as a raising agent, you're going to need to use warm milk, but I'm not. I'm using baking powder as my chemical raising agent. I'm going to add a little bit of milk to this. Add a little at a time, a tablespoon at a time. Do not put too much liquid in this one, okay? Gradually. You can always add a little bit more liquid, but you're going to find it very hard to take it away. So add a little bit at a time. So I'm going to just add a little bit more. Here we go. And I'm just going to combine that one together a little bit more. And you can see what I'm doing. I'm stirring it with my knife. Save the washing up. Let's use the knife we used earlier for when we were cutting in. Just going to bind that one all together. So a little bit more milk into there. Fabulous. Okay, combining that one, and it's just starting to come together into a dough ball now. And what I'm doing is I'm pressing the knife against the side of the bowl as I do this one to bind it all together. Okay, so I'm pressing it into the side of the bowl. So here we go, a little bit more liquid into there. Just going to press that one again into the side of my bowl. And it's cleaning the bowl as I go. Can you see that? You might be able to see it's actually cleaning my bowl as I go through this one. I stir the liquid in, it's actually cleaning the bowl, which is brilliant. A little bit more milk in there. Okay. It's just combining it now, and I've nearly got a clean bowl. So just keep pressing it against the side of the bowl, cleaning the bowl. That's the sort of action we're looking for until it all just combines together. Don't put too much liquid in. If you do put too much liquid in, save it with a little bit of flour, okay? So you can put a little bit more flour in. But ideally, we don't want to be putting too much liquid into this one. Okay, here we go. So that is now combined and we are ready to go. I have now got a bowl with a dough, a nice thick dough in there, and it's clean around the outside. You might be able to see that one on there, but actually my bowl is now clean. I've cleaned it with my dough in there. Now the dough I'm now going to put onto my work surface. So I've now got a bowl of dough on the work surface there. So let's do that one now. Just going to put that one into there so you can see. Okay. So let's move the camera down so you can see what we're doing there. So you might be able to see now that I have got a ball of dough on my work surface there. It's a beautiful ball of dough ready to go. Okay, I've got my rolling pin ready to go as well. Let's just check you've all got to that stage as well. What have we got there? Another thing you want to know, substituting cheese. Oh yes, another one. God, Georgia's on the ball today. Another one, not only aquafabia, she's replacing cheese with nooch. And nutritional yeast. I like it. We use a nutritional yeast there as well. I love this one. Tomato sauce. Yes, you could use a tomato-based sauce instead of a pesto for that. Yeah, that's fine. We're growing basil too. Rod, do you want to go and see my basil? I'm going to go and grab my basil plant. It's not that big yet, but let me show you what mine is. Here we go. Grown from seeds. There we go. It's not the most impressive yet, but it's been grown from seed. It's a lockdown basil, this one. There we go. How much pesto? Very good question. So with this one, you're looking for around about 3 tablespoons of pesto. Okay, so ideally, if you're looking at gram wise there, you're looking at around about 45 grams worth of pesto there. So 45 grams, 50 grams of pesto would be fine. I've used 50 grams, I would say 50 grams, maybe slightly over, depending on how much you like, but 50 grams. These jam jars come in around about 190, 180, 190. I'm using it, say 50 grams would be fine with that one. But I'd say about 3 tablespoons is going to be good for you. Okay, let's show you where we're up to now. Let me quickly flick back to the recipe. So you've got that one. Let me send that one live to you so you can see where we're up to now. So you can see that we've done adding the egg or the egg substitute. We've done that one. We've added that in. That's all ready to go. And we're going to do now. We've added the milk into there as well, and we're now going to be going into the next stage where we're going to work it into. We don't want to overwork it to become too tough. We kind of kneaded it with our bowl, and we're going to just push it into a shape we're kneading it. Then we're going to roll it out. Now we're going to roll it out into a rectangle. So we're going to go on to steps 9 and 10. Now, if you know how to plait, you can go into plait this one. If you don't know how to plait, you can just twist it. I will show you a simple way. And let's see how you go with your plaiting, okay? So we're going to go on to steps 9 and 10 now. So let me just go on to 9 and 10. Right. Okay, so back to me. Fabulous. Now we're going to go on to steps 9 and 10, which is going to be about rolling this out. So I've got my bowl of dough. I'm just going to knead it very lightly into a ball there. There we go. I'm just going to very lightly, don't over knead this one. We're just going to be very lightly bringing that together into a ball. So it's a nice ball, there we go. So it's a scone bread now at the moment, but again, if you were to use yeast as your raising agent, your biological raising agent, then you could end up leaving this for a little longer. So if I was using yeast now with my bread, I'd probably cover this one and leave that to work for, let's say, about half an hour in a warm place. If you're using a homemade sourdough yeast, then you're looking to leave that overnight and then use it. But we're using a scone bread with chemical raising agent in it, so we can use this one straight away. Okay, I'm now going to shape this one into a rectangle. You see what I've just done there? I'm going to shape this one into a rectangle. And now I'm going to put a little bit of flour onto the top. And I've got my rolling pin with a little bit of flour on it as well. And I'm going to roll this one out. Okay, so I'm going to roll it out into a rectangle. Now it's important that I'm going to turn it around now, that we make it into a rectangle. It is very important that the shape we try and create is a rectangle. Okay, so we need to make it longer this way. Now, how thin should you be rolling it to? You should be rolling this one to about a pound coin. Okay, so pound coin thickness. Now, if it's not quite making a rectangle, you can shape it into a rectangle. That's fine. We can just shape it a bit more. I'm going to just shape this one in so it's more rectangular, oblong, rectangular shape. There we go. So we've got two sides longer than the other. So it's more like a piece of paper. Can you see what we've done there? So that's a nice rectangle. I'm going to just give that one a little bit more of a roll so it's more of an even width. There we go. So I've now got a rectangular piece of scone bread. Can you see that one there on the board? Just going to roll that one out once more. Okay. Now it's really starting to look like a piece of paper now. Right sort of shape of an A4 sheet of paper. And that's what we're looking to do. We're going to create a nice, even rectangle. If it starts to stick, just make sure, lift it up, put some flour underneath, lift it up, put some flour underneath. It shouldn't be sticking, okay? So there we go. Rectangular. Hopefully you can all see that one. All right. So we got a rectangular piece there of scone bread. Okay. So we are, hopefully you're also at the same point there. You've got yourself a rectangular piece. So you want to create yourself a piece that's just like a sheet of paper. Okay. So we've got a sheet of paper just there of pastry. Okay. Have you all done that? Hopefully you've all got to that point there. And we've got a nice rectangular piece. Good. Now, we've now got to start to shape this one. We're going to shape our dough. Before we do that, we need to put a filling in. So we're going to stuff this one with whatever filling you've got, whether it's tomato sauce, a pesto sauce, whatever you make, a homemade pesto maybe, whatever it is, you're going to add that in. So I'm going to do the same now. I'm going to use my pesto in there. And I'm going to spread that all over the top of my dough. So here we go. I'm going to use that now, and I'm just going to spread that all over the top there. Now I'm not going to go right to the very edges, okay? So leave yourself a gap around the outside. There we go. So just going to leave myself a little bit of a gap around the outside there, a little bit of a border. Okay, can you see what I've done there? So a little bit of a gap around the outside. I haven't gone all the way to the edges there. Okay. So just a little gap around the outside. And that's my filling done. Okay. On top of that, I'm going to put a little bit of cheese. So it looks a little bit like a green pizza at the moment. It might look like a red pizza if you put tomato on there, but you want to be putting your pizza a bit like a pizza. It's going to look even more like a pizza now because I'm going to put a little bit of the cheese on there. So I'm going to sprinkle that on the top now. Just sprinkle that one over the top. A little bit of cheese on the top there. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm just sprinkling cheese on the top. Let's show you how mine's looking now. A little bit of cheese. Just over the top there. Okay. Good. Now the next stage is I'm going to roll this. So when I'm rolling this, I'm rolling from the longest side. So I'm rolling the longest side, a bit like a Swiss roll. I'm going to make it into a sausage. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go from the furthest end. So here we go, from the furthest end, and I'm going to roll it towards me into a long sausage. Can you see that one? So I'm just rolling that towards me like a long sausage, like a Swiss roll, nice and tightly, rolling that one up. Okay, I'm just going to show you on the side view what that looks like. Can you see how I've rolled that one up on the screen there? Okay, nicely rolled up, and we've got that one into a nice sausage. Okay, good. Now, a sharp knife. Okay, you want to be using a sharp knife. Doesn't matter what size you use. You could be using a little paring knife, or you could be using a chef's or a cook's knife. Be careful with these knives, but it's important that you use a sharp knife. We do not want to be using, we don't want to be using the same butter knife. Don't use the butter knife that you used before. You want to be using a sharp knife for this one, okay? And let me show you what we're going to do. We're going to be using a bridge cut, using a bridge cut like that, and you're going to be cutting through. Not. So not. We seem to have a problem with the connection there. Okay, back. Oh, here we go. Hopefully you should be able to see us there. Little problem with the connection this morning. Okay, right, we should be able to see again. So we've got the bridge knife, and that's going to cut through the middle. Okay, so we're going to be cutting through the middle as we go with this one. So again, apologies for if the internet connection is terrible this morning, but if you're not getting this, but I'm going to try again. So here we go. I'll do on here what I'm going to do. So using your knife, I'm going to leave 2 fingers, press down with 2 fingers at one end where I'm not going to cut. So I'm going to push 2 fingers at one end where I'm not going to cut, and then I'm going to cut down the middle. You see that? So with my sharp knife, very slowly, I'm going to cut down the middle. Now it means you'll have a gap at the end where you've not cut, but on the inside, you should now have a stripy 2 legs. Can you see that? It's probably the most difficult part of today. So I've now got 2 legs. Now, if you're making this into a braid, you need to cut into 3 legs. So you'd split that sausage into 3, and then you can braid each length together. For me, I'm just going to cut it into 2 so I can twist it. But if you want to cut it into 3, then you can braid each of the 3 and make a braided bread, which is even more difficult. So if you want to have a go with that, brilliant. So I just got it into 2, and I'm going to twist these 2 back on each other. So let me show you how that's going to work. So I've gone with 1, and with the nice stripy side up, you see that one, nice stripy side, nice stripy leg. I'm going to twist 1 leg over the top of the other, and then I'm going to do the same. I'm going to twist that one over the top, twist that one over, and that is my scone bread twist. Okay, so can you see that? Now, so if you want to split it into 3, you can make a braid out of that, and that is my scone bread twist. Okay, that's my long scone bread twist. If you want to, you can turn that into a circle, called a bread called a French couronne, and you can break that one into a French couronne bread. You see that one? Now, I'm going to lift this onto my baking tray. So there we go. I'm going to delicately lift the plaited bread into the centre of my baking tray. Now you can either keep it long and plaited, or you can circle it back on itself. So long or plaited, it's up to you. In circle, so you know it's long or in circle. There's my bread ready to go. Okay, so once you've done that, we're going to give it a little bit of coating before we get it into the oven. So I'm just going to brush this one with a little bit of milk. So you can use your fingers if you want to. You can use egg, you can use milk on this one. It doesn't matter which one you use for that. And we're going to brush it. So I'm just and brushes. If you haven't got a pastry brush, use a clean paintbrush that you haven't used. It's been properly washed. You could use that. I'm going to just go and grab one as well. Let me grab one. Okay, here we go. So I've got my brush. So I've got some more. Little bit more milk, or you can use egg. So there's my milk, and I can use a pastry brush, or I've got a clean paintbrush. That would work fine. And I'm just going to brush over the top of my bread. Okay, I'm just going to paint that over the top. What's that going to do? It's going to give it a beautiful colour. Okay, it's going to give it a beautiful, wonderful colour, and it's going to give it a lovely shine to it. So I'm just literally going to paint all of that over the top, and then I'm going to get it into the oven for you, okay? Now, we've got a lot of science today we've gone through, and there's a lot of food science in this one. From, like we said, we've done physics, mechanical aeration, we've done chemistry, chemical aeration, and we've done biology, biological aeration. All these things are going to make add gas or air to our food. And by adding gas or air to our food, it's going to make our food rise. Okay, and we like good raising agents because good raising agents give us big food. And who doesn't like bigger food? It's going to make our food rise up. Okay, so there we go. Painted, glazed as we call it. My bread, and I've gone with a twisted, plaited bread there, ready to go into the oven. That's all good. And then we'll do a little recap on aeration and the different types of aeration again. So I'm just going to put this one into the oven. Let's go and put that one in the oven. Don't forget to use oven gloves when we're putting it into the oven. Your oven should be at 200 degrees centigrade. And we're going to put that one in. Let's go back to the recipe and recap where we are. So for those of you who are looking where we're up to, let me just quickly shoot back to the recipe there for you. Okay, so we've just done number 9 and number 10. Okay, so number 9, number 10, you see that one on the board there. We've rolled out the dough. Okay, so it's all been rolled out. And then once we've rolled out the dough, we spread it with our sauce. And there's some options there about being able to make your own sauce there. Then we've cut in half lengthwise, twisted it all together. Okay, so we've cut in half lengthways and twisted it. And then we're going to bake them for around about 20 minutes, or at least until they're golden brown. Okay, so that's where you need to be up to. So we need to be going now and turning this one so it's in there. Right, let's have a look at any more questions or queries before I get back. No, so that's okay. So once you've done that one, washing up and clearing up. Okay, you need to be washing up and clearing up, making sure your area is nice and tidy. So once you've done all that, you need to go to collect all your equipment you've used, wash everything up using the correct method. And by the correct method, I mean the first thing you're going to wash up is that sharp knife. You're going to brush that away from yourself. Don't use a cloth. Don't drop the sharp knife into the washing up bowl, or obviously if you're putting it into a dishwasher, that's different, but make sure you get that one away first. And then dry everything up with your clean tea towel. Again, with the exception of a sharp knife where you put it on the draining board and let it dry itself. If you use it, you might cut yourself if you start using a tea towel on a sharp knife. And then put everything away once checked by the teacher, which again is not me at your home, it's by whoever the grown-up is at your home, checking that you've cleaned up properly. Okay, let's go back to me. Now, that is your lesson for today. I love to see your photos, so please send me your photos of how your bakes turn out, and that would be great. You can send that by email. You can post that to me through Teams. If you're watching this at Talkie Girls Grammar, if you're watching this back on YouTube, then that's fine. You can just contact me and let me know and email me those ones. It'd be great to see you. Leave any comments about what it is and how it's turned out. That would be wonderful. Okay, so that is your scone bread twist practical for today, and we've covered all different sorts of raising agents there. Raising agents which aerate our food. We've done mechanical, chemical, biological. We missed one. It is now in the oven. We've got one called physical aeration, where we do nothing. Okay, now what is physical aeration? That is what's happening in the oven. We have created all of these air. We put all this air into the food. Now, what happens to gases when they heat up? They expand, and that's going to happen in the oven now. We've got our gas is in there. We've got our air in there by mechanical means, sieving, rubbing in, chemical, if you use chemical. So if you used baking powder, bicarbonate soda cream of tartar, you put air in through chemicals. You might, if you didn't have any chemicals, you might have done it by yeast, biological, but you got air into there. Now that oven is going to heat up all that air, and as it heats up, it's going to expand, and that's the final sort of aeration, and that is what we call physical aeration. Physical aeration is the one that happens in the oven, and that is all your aerations. Now, if you want to know more about aerations, I'm going to leave you a YouTube clip which I did about before for GCSE, which just literally covers every single one of those in a little bit more detail, with some fun stuff where I blow stuff up. Yeah, I'm going to show you how to blow up food and make food fireworks with aeration. I will post the clip to that. If you're watching this on YouTube already, if you jump over to the video at the top of my playlist for GCSE, you'll find it there straight away. And that is called Investigating Raising Agents. Okay. For those watching me at Talkie Girls Grammar, I'm going to give you the link to that Investigating Raising Agents, so you can have a watch of that. It's a short film which I did a few years ago, which talks about those. And like I say, it shows you how to make fireworks out of food, and shows you how to have some fun with food, blowing it up. Okay, and I end up with yeah, foodie fireworks on my head. So if you want to watch that video, I will post you the link to that one, so you can have some fun watching that one as well, and that will explain mechanical, chemical, biological and physical aeration. You have just done GCSE level aeration, year 7s. You should be very proud of yourselves there for being able to get that one. So the video is a lot of fun and will make lots more sense now we've actually done this particular scone bread twist. And it's science you get to eat. Brilliant. We love science that you can eat. So that's today's lesson. Like I say, send me the photographs of how you're doing. All this to say is thank you very much for joining me. Please post your photos so I know how it went. Thank you very much for joining me. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. Look after yourself and look after those of you around you. OK, thank you very much. See you again soon. Goodbye.